Imagine you're walking your dog, and he suddenly vanishes down a hole in the ground. You call his name, and you hear a faint bark coming from deep within the earth. This is exactly what happened to four teenagers in France on September 12, 1940. They dug the hole wider, squeezed into the darkness, and discovered a breathtaking, silent world that had been sealed for 17,000 years. They had found the cave of Lascaux, a gallery of Ice Age art so vivid and powerful, it's now called the Sistine Chapel of Prehistory. Welcome to 10-Minute History. I'm your host, Jake Sullivan, and today we're journeying deep into the earth to answer one of archaeology's greatest mysteries. What is the meaning of prehistoric cave art? Are these beautiful images just decoration, or are they a complex code, the very first stories our ancestors ever told? To understand the art, we have to understand the world that made it. The artists who painted these masterpieces were not the grunting, brutish cavemen of cartoons, they were us. They were Homo sapiens, with brains and abilities just like our own, living between roughly 45,000 and 10,000 years ago during the Ice Age. Their world was a vast, cold, and open landscape, a kind of subarctic grassland we call a steppe tundra. And this landscape was home to giants. These artists lived alongside and hunted woolly mammoths, woolly rhinos, massive cave lions, and the powerful wild cattle known as aurochs. This animal-rich world was their supermarket, their hardware store, and as we'll see, their cathedral. These were highly intelligent hunter-gatherers, living in small, mobile groups. The deep, dark parts of the caves where the artists found were not their homes. These were special, sacred places, requiring a dangerous journey into the earth. The creation of this art marks a moment called the cognitive revolution, a time when humans began to think abstractly, to use symbols, and to plan complex projects. Making this art wasn't simple doodling. It required sourcing minerals for paint, manufacturing tools, securing a light source like an animal fat lamp, and venturing into the terrifying dark. For a long time, the academic world refused to believe it. When the first cave, Altamira in Spain, was discovered in 1879 by an amateur archaeologist and his young daughter, experts dismissed it as a modern forgery. They simply couldn't accept that primitive people were capable of such stunning artistic achievement. It took decades and more discoveries in sealed-off caves for the world to finally accept the truth. So how did they create these masterpieces in total darkness? The artists were brilliant innovators. They didn't see the cave wall as a flat canvas. They used its natural shapes. A bulge in the rock would become the powerful shoulder of a bison. A crack in the stone would form the leg of a horse. Viewed by the flickering, moving light of a torch, these animals would have seemed to breathe and move, a truly three-dimensional experience. Their paint palette was made from the earth itself. Blacks came from charcoal, or, more often, a mineral called manganese oxide. Reds, yellows, and browns came from iron oxides, or ochre. They would grind these minerals into a fine powder and mix it with a binder, maybe water, animal fat, or even saliva. Then, they applied the paint in several ways. They drew with chunks of ochre, like a crayon. They painted with brushes made from animal hair or chewed twigs. And they used a remarkably sophisticated technique where they would hold liquid pigment in their mouths and spray it through a hollow bone. This was how they created the iconic hand stencils, placing a hand on the wall and spraying around it, leaving a ghostly negative silhouette. But what did they choose to paint? This is where it gets truly fascinating, because they were incredibly selective. Over 95% of all the images are of animals. And across France and Spain, four animals dominate: the horse, the bison, the wild aurochs, and the mammoth. But here's the first clue that this isn't just a menu of what they ate. In many sites, the animal bones they left behind show they were mostly eating reindeer. Yet reindeer are surprisingly rare in the art. Instead, they focused on these large, powerful, and often dangerous creatures like cave lions and bears, animals they likely didn't hunt regularly. This suggests the animals were chosen for their symbolic importance, not just their food value. Human figures, on the other hand, are extremely rare, and when they do appear, they are drawn completely differently than the naturalistic animals. They are often simple stick figures, lacking detail. The most famous examples are bizarre human-animal hybrids called therianthropes. In one French cave, There's a figure with human legs, the antlers of a stag, and the face of an owl, which scholars have nicknamed the sorcerer. And in the famous shaft scene in Lascaux, we see a stick figure man with the head of a bird lying on the ground next to a massive disemboweled bison. This is one of the only clear narrative scenes in all of cave art, a story frozen in time for 17,000 years. But perhaps the biggest key to unlocking the meaning of the art has been overlooked for decades. Accompanying the animals in almost every cave are abstract signs: dots, lines, zigzags, and key-shaped symbols. For years, archaeologists dismissed them as doodles, but a paleoanthropologist named Genevieve von Petzinger did something revolutionary. She cataloged all the signs from hundreds of European caves. She discovered that our ancestors weren't just scribbling randomly. They used a tiny set of only 32 specific signs, over and over again, across thousands of miles and for a period of 30,000 years. This stunning consistency implies these were not doodles. They were a code, a shared, conventionalized system of symbols. It wasn't writing as we know it, but it was graphic communication, perhaps the very first step toward it. So this brings us to the great debate. Why did they do it? Was it symbol or was it story? The earliest theory was simple: art. For art's sake. They were just decorating their homes for pleasure. But this theory quickly falls apart. The art isn't in their living spaces. It's in deep, dangerous, hard-to-reach chambers. And they often painted new images directly on top of old ones, which you wouldn't do if your goal was a pretty wall hanging. The next big theory, which dominated for half a century, was sympathetic hunting magic. The idea was that by painting an animal, you gained power over it. Painting a bison with a spear in its side was a ritual to ensure a successful hunt. This made sense, but it doesn't explain why the animals they painted often weren't the ones they ate. And it doesn't explain the predators, the hand stencils, or those 32 geometric signs. Then, in the 1960s, researchers started to think about the caves as a whole, structured system. They proposed that the placement of animals was deliberate, reflecting a complex worldview or mythology, maybe a binary opposition between male and female principles represented by the horse and the bison. This was a huge leap forward, treating the art as a symbolic language for the first time. But the specific male-female pattern didn't hold up in every cave. This leads us to the most powerful and widely accepted theory today: shamanism. This theory suggests the caves were gateways, veils between our world and a spirit world. The artists were shamans, religious specialists who entered trance-like states to journey into that spirit world. The evidence for this is compelling. First, neuropsychology shows that the human brain experiences predictable things during a trance. First, people see geometric patterns, dots, grids, and lines, which perfectly match the abstract signs in the caves. In a deeper trance, they feel like they're flying through a tunnel or vortex, just like the long passages of a cave. Finally, they hallucinate powerful animals and can feel themselves transforming into them, which explains the strange human-animal hybrid figures. Under this theory, the cave wall wasn't a canvas, it was a membrane. The shaman would touch the rock to connect with the animal spirits they believed lived inside. Painting was an act of fixing their vision, of drawing power from that other world. This also explains why they painted over old images. The act of painting the vision was what mattered, not the final product. And amazingly, researchers have found that over 90% of the paintings are located in the most acoustically resonant spots in the caves, places perfect for chanting or music, which would have helped induce these trance states. So where do we land on the question of symbol or story? The truth is, it's a false choice. The art was both, and so much more. Von Petzinger's work on the 32 repeating signs is powerful evidence for a symbolic code, a form of proto-writing used to convey information. But the Lascaux shaft scene, or an even older scene from a cave in Sulawesi, Indonesia, are clearly stories. Dated to nearly 44,000 years ago, the Sulawesi panel shows small, part-human figures hunting wild pigs. This is the oldest known narrative scene in the world. So the art was symbolic, it was narrative, it was used for shamanic rituals. And it was likely also a way to store information. It could have been a library of knowledge for a non-literate people, a way to teach younger generations about animal migrations, group mythology, and social rules. What's even more incredible is that this cognitive leap wasn't just a European thing, or even just a Homo sapiens thing. The discovery of a 45,000-year-old pig painting in Indonesia proved this was a global human phenomenon. And even more recently, new dating techniques applied to red symbols and hand stencils in 3 Spanish caves have yielded a date of 65,000 years ago. That's 20,000 years before modern humans are thought to have arrived in that region. The artists, it seems, were Neanderthals, proving that the capacity for symbolic thought and art was not unique to our species. These discoveries are shattering old ideas. Analysis of the hand stencils has shown that about 75% of them were made not by male hunters, but by women. The art of the caves was a community affair. Today, to avoid the damage caused by human breath that plagued Lascaux, most of these original caves are sealed off. Scientists study them with high-resolution 3D scans, and the public can visit breathtakingly accurate replicas. The art of the Ice Age is a direct message from our deepest past. It shows us the exact moment our ancestors began to record their inner world. The figures of horses, bison, and lions dancing in the dark are a mirror reflecting the dawn of our own consciousness. They prove that the need to create, to tell stories, and to find our place in the universe is one of the most ancient and fundamental parts of being human. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know down in the comments. If you found this interesting or learned something new, please give this video a like, and don't forget to subscribe to 10-Minute History for more deep dives. Thanks for listening.